Well, welcome everyone. This is our second Community Voices series, and I'm so pleased to be co-hosting this with Michigan Clinicians for Climate Action. We are running a Community Voices series every month. Mike is going to make some other announcements too. Just a quick overview of how we're going to do things today. This is going to be conversation style. We've worked with our panelists to develop some questions and an outline. And unfortunately, Dr. Lisa Del Buno cannot be here today. So you're stuck with me as your moderator for the program to walk us through these pieces. If you have questions, though, do put them in the chat along the way. If something super timely comes up, we will make sure we get to it and interrupt our interviews portion. If not, we'll save some time at the end of the program for the panelists to address those questions. So be active in the chat. You could even introduce yourself and throw in, where you're at physically coming from, location-wise today, and maybe any organizations that you're with, so we get a sense of our audience here today on this Friday. But thank you all so much for joining us. I'm going to give just a couple quick Michigan Climate Action Network announcements, and then I'll let Cindy Wickstrom, who is here from Michigan Clinicians for Climate Action, to give a couple announcements from their perspective, and then we'll get started with some interviews of our panelists. Interview sounds too, conversation with our panelists. So just a couple of quick things. Our next Community Voices series for Michigan Climate Action Network, we just got the program together, so good timing. Will be on Friday, May 19th, again from the noon to 1 lunch hour. And what we've been working on, we have a great intern right now from Western Michigan University, and we've been compiling the different climate plans and sustainability work that our 15 public institutions of higher education are doing in Michigan. We're going to be releasing that full report and having a few panelists talk about how universities are leading on climate action. Representatives from Michigan Tech, Michigan State, and University of Michigan will join us for that program next month. So tune in and you can get signed up. I'll put some links in the chat so you can figure out how to join MyCan and stay up with us. And last but not least, our June meeting. There's nothing else happening for MyCan in June except for the summit, because it takes everybody and everyone to get the Michigan Climate Summit off and running. This year's theme is sharing our stories. We will be at Oakland University on June 2nd for a full day, folks. We are inviting legislators who will be there to talk about some of the bill packages that Michigan is advancing right now and how you can support those, as well as educators and advocates. There's going to be art. There are cultural movement makers joining us that are going to show you how to use music in your organizing. I'm a big believer, after having done policy and science for 20 years, that we need some art and some music in this movement if we're going to be more successful. So please join us, RSVP for the summit, and see us again then. Cindy, I'll stop sharing here and see if you probably have some wonderful announcements from Micah.
I sure do. Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining. I'm Cindy Wickstrom. I am the Director of Operations for MICA, and I'm filling in for Lisa today. And I wanted to introduce our new admin that we just recently hired, Lauren Sawyer. Really excited to have her on board. She's graduating this year with her bachelor's in environmental studies and sustainability. So welcome, Lauren, if you just want to maybe put your video on and wave. And
hi, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for joining.
Yeah.
And Lauren's going to be sharing some links as I'm going through, and she'll put those in the chat too. But just wanted to first let you know that we all, Lisa, Lauren, and I all have new email addresses. So you can reach us at cindy@michigancca.com, and then Lauren at michigancca.com, and Lisa at michigancca.com. So we've kind of moved away from the Gmail account and, using our domain to make it look a little bit more professional and go with our branding. So we're excited about that. Lauren's going to share a link for a quick sign on for you all to, if you have time, to tell your lawmaker to support the $150 million for safer, reliable school buses. And there's a letter in there. It's just a matter of putting in your email address, and there's already a template in there, and clicking submit. There's also a great article that we wanted to share with you all on educating health professionals about climate change. She'll share that link as well. And then Micah has our next educational meeting in June, on June 6th. We're partnering with the Michigan Sustainable Business Forum, and we're going to be talking about decarbonizing healthcare for and the HHS pledge. So we're excited about that. So if you want to become involved with us and stay in the loop as well, she'll also put on a form there to join our rapid response team, and membership is free with us. So just go ahead and sign up to stay in the loop, and we look forward to having you all on board.
Wow, wonderful. So much going on. And Micah, y'all are advancing these things. So I think the next report MyCan should do is on on hospital administration. Like when we think about our anchor institutions and how they are achieving decarbonization and making their own climate plans, that sounds like the great next project we should do together.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's going to be huge these next few months.
Right on. All right. There, I think all the
Thank
links
you.
to all the stuff we just talked about are in the chat, everybody.
All right.
From the articles to the next MICA event, the next MyCan event, and our upcoming summit. Please check us all out on the web and follow us, like us, give us some love. These folks are out there doing the work. So today, you're all here to hear from two really amazing practitioners. And I love the title and the theme of today, right? From practitioner to advocate. As a former academic myself, I understand this journey a little bit and am so proud to be able to support our folks here today. We have two amazing, outstanding practitioners, Dr. Sue Holcombe and Dr. Cheryl Ruble. And they're going to discuss their journey and how they became leading climate advocates and effectively engaging in advocacy at the intersection of climate, food, agriculture, and health. Dr. Susan Holcombe is a retired large animal veterinary surgeon and professor from Michigan State University's College of Veterinary Medicine. She combines her knowledge and practical experience in animal agriculture with a strong interest in environmental activism and volunteers with several groups, including MICA, Citizen Climate Lobby, which is how we first met, I think, and the Antrim County Conservation District. Welcome, Sue Holcombe. Dr. Cheryl Ruble is an internist working in advanced wound care, hyperbaric medicine, and infectious disease. She's the mother to twins, Hannah and Paul, an environmental zealot, and believes that healthy soil equals healthy plants, equals healthy animals, equals healthy people. Every time I read that, I think about the knee bones connected to the thigh bone, right? This is all interconnected. And Dr. Ruble really brings that together as she works to reform and roll back industrial agriculture and enforce and strengthen reforms restricting concentrated animal feeding operations that pollute our water and soil and produce unhealthy animal protein using inhumane practice. She also works with MICA and the Sierra Club. Welcome to you both. Thanks so much for joining us today. Well, we thought we would kick things off with just a little, you heard the formal intro from me, but we're always interested in how folks got to their positions in this journey, again, from your background and experience. And we didn't really devise an order. Again, we can be pretty informal and have a conversation here. Could each of you maybe just share a little bit more about what led you to connect your practitioner work to climate change and how you really got involved in the advocacy side of things?
Sue, why don't you go first and then we can flip-flop.
Oh, sure. Well, first of all, thanks all of you for being here for this hour. It's exciting that there are so many people who are interested and active in our climate change battle. And I will say for me, it's probably similar to many of you. I had a profession that I loved and valued, and I'm so grateful that I had the job that I had. I loved all of it, but it was all consuming. There's no question it was all consuming. And as I began to open my eyes and raise my head after a lot of training and things, I realized that the climate emergency was not just here, but it was endangering huge parts of the world. And I needed to be involved. And so when it was time to retire, I knew that working in climate advocacy was going to be important. And because I was a large animal veterinarian, really segueing to agriculture was a natural thing for me to do because I had a little bit of knowledge. So for those of you who are working in this area or considering getting even more involved, I do think that's useful. I think when you have some experience and a little bit of knowledge in an area, just bring that with you, because it will be helpful, and it's going to make you feel a little bit empowered, but you'd be shocked how helpful that is to the people that you're working with. So that's really what led me to the climate area and advocating in the area of agriculture.
Great, thanks. Go ahead, Cheryl. Oh, you're on mute.
I'm keeping myself muted because I'm coughing periodically. Like you said, Denise, it really has been a journey. And Sue, I have to laugh when you said your career was all consuming. I think this is even more consuming. So I just have to say that. My journey started in 2017, a few months after my husband and I bought some future retirement property near Lake Michigan in Montague, Michigan, when I found out that a 4,000 or so swine CAFO was coming to town. And it just intuitively didn't sound like a good idea. And so I began researching into the wee hours of the night, the day I found out. And to make a long story short, I haven't stopped researching. I haven't stopped trying to affect change. It's a David versus Goliath fight, but, you know, David ultimately won. You know, it started off, everybody's pretty familiar with the environmental risks associated with CAFOs, you know, water pollution, air pollution. I quickly realized as a physician that there were significant public health risks that don't get quite as much attention. So I decided I need to get that on the radar. And then along the way, I discovered, you know, the environmental justice impacts, and I think that's important to say. And then last but not least, I discovered the climate impact of industrial agriculture. Thanks to happenstance, I found out last year that the Michigan legislature had appropriated funds for a study to evaluate renewable natural gas development and production in Michigan. And I knew that manure biogas was going to be part of that, would figure in heavily. So I started researching again, and I submitted a public comment, gave an oral public comment. And then that's how I met Lisa from MICA and Sue. And I'm so grateful that they have, you know, gotten on board the industrial agriculture and climate change train with me. I'll stop there.
Yeah, wow. No, it's really fascinating. And I'm sure lots of folks on today's Zoom can appreciate that. And here at Michigan Climate Action Network, you know, we strongly believe there's a place for everyone in this movement. And so I appreciate what both of you are saying, because really this is what it takes, and the folks that we want to support. You start looking around and you start understanding what's going on with the climate crisis, and everyone has a certain skill or expertise or thing that they're really invested in or that they know a lot about. And we just need everyone to take that climate lens to their work. I hope, right, one day this will just be the social norm, and climate will be integrated into all of our professions in a beautiful way. And until then, we have to work the transition. And so I also had to smile at the all-consuming moment. I think I thought academia was a full-time job. Boy, I think I work more now on climate pieces. And so thank you for making that transition, and for the justice point as well, because you know, we're sitting here as privileged folks who are able to make that kind of career move and really dedicate our lives to the urgency and meet this moment. And I know that there are lots of folks that care that might not have the time to be able to commit like we are. And so we welcome you in the movement. And again, everybody has a place. Everyone has some knowledge or some community pieces that they can bring forward to solve this and work together. So I want to dive into some of these issues. Well, first, let me bet, are there any other groups that we should mention that either of you work with or that you'd like to make sure the audience knows about? We know about MICA, we know about MICAN, and Cheryl works with Sierra Club, and Sue really, again, works with Citizens Climate Lobby. Are there some other big organizations that you would support or that you would let our audience know about?
Yeah, there are so many, and I think sometimes that's overwhelming. So you can always dabble and you can join and listen, and many of the organizations, which I think is really smart, collaborate with each other. But the Climate Reality Project is a great organization, and it's a great organization. Really teaches people how to give presentations, how to get involved, and it's another one that I would suggest. It does some really nice training.
And I'd like to give a nod to an organization that I recently joined called Michiganders for a Just Farming System. Excuse me. If you're interested in the animal agriculture, industrial animal agricultural piece of climate change, they're about more than climate change, but if that particular piece of the climate crisis picture grabs you, I would suggest looking them up and joining their efforts. And of course, the Sierra Club. I am co-chair of the Grassroots Network National CAFO sub-team, and we delve into the climate change aspect quite a bit, and so that's another avenue, the Sierra Club, either on a Michigan state level or national level with the Grassroots Network.
Wow, I didn't even know you were doing that, Cheryl. We're gonna work that into your next intro. Well, I want to spend the bulk of our time here on the particular efforts and initiatives that Sue and Cheryl have been working on, and then we'll move towards how you can get more involved and what the network can do. So, and it seems like we're going to do a little back and forth here, but really, what should some of the other climate advocates know about your work? I know it's a big question, so maybe we want to start with just even explaining those connections between like agriculture and health, and why you believe the kind of current system maybe is off track, to put it mildly.
Yeah, I think that is a huge question, and I will rein myself in because I could jump on a soapbox pretty easily. I think our food system became industrialized so that we could produce large amounts of food as inexpensively as possible. And I think lots of people have heard the phrase that the US feeds the world, and to some degree that is true. However, because our agricultural industry did automate and worked as hard as it could to make food as quickly and as cheaply as possible, we are now in a situation where the food that we're producing is, people even refer to it almost as food-like substance. It's not necessarily nutritious. And in fact, the food that's being produced industrially is probably driving a lot of our health crisis and problems. So the way that our government now subsidizes how food is produced, and that is largely through the Farm Bill, which is being reintroduced and rewritten right now. Those subsidies really allow monocropping, production of corn, soy, wheat, industrially raised animals that are causing a lot of health crises, including obesity, diabetes, hypertension, some forms of cancer. And so we are paying less for food in the grocery store, but it is not nutritious and it's associated with a lot of disease. And so I think what many folks that are working on climate in agriculture are discussing, and again, I'm a cog in a large wheel, is that we must fix our agricultural system to produce nutritious food and healthy food. And the way to do that is by working through the Farm Bill and the way that money is used to subsidize farmers. We could talk about this issue strictly as a health issue. We would never have to talk about climate But climate is a health issue. And agriculture is a health issue. And if we can fix our agricultural system, we can largely fix our climate as well as our healthcare system.
Sue, you did a great job, outlining the connection between our industrial food system and, diet-related health conditions, and started to lead into, the Farm Bill and how we can begin to fix things. I'd like to add, since this is, add a little bit more about climate change and the industrial agriculture contribution, because I don't think people fully understand the significant contribution of industrial agriculture. And when I say industrial agriculture, I am not just referring to CAFOs, but also the cropland that is used to grow animal feed. That has to enter into the equation. So, agriculture is responsible for about 10% of total US greenhouse gases. Doesn't sound like much, does it? We all know that that's a lot, but to the layman, 10%. Okay, but when you look at methane, okay, and methane is a much more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. Agriculture is responsible for 1/3 of methane emissions, and the vast majority of that is industrial agriculture. About 1/4 from what the EPA refers to as manure management, which is code for manure lagoons and manure pits. Okay. The other 3/4 comes from ruminants, mostly CAFO cows. In other words, from enteric fermentation, otherwise known as cow burps. So looking at the nitrous oxide, the contribution of agriculture to nitrous oxide, it's responsible for 80% of US nitrous oxide emissions. And most of that is also from industrial agriculture. A small portion is due to nitrous oxide emissions from stored manure. But the vast majority is due to nitrogen inputs in the form of fertilizer, either manure or chemical fertilizers. If 70 to 75% of croplands are used to grow animal feed, and 99% of animal foods come from CAFOs, do the math, then the vast majority of nitrous oxide emissions come from industrial agriculture. So, it's significant. The contribution is significant. And although industrial agriculture is part of the problem, agriculture can be part of the solution. And that's what's important here. Our farmers can actually lead the way and be, part of the solution, as long as our government supports them in that process.
Yeah, if I can jump in there, I think that's a really important thing to say, is that farmers certainly understand the impact of climate change. And we can utilize agriculture as not just a way to help fix our climate situation, as Cheryl has mentioned, by diminishing the use of synthetic nitrogen and phosphorus-based fertilizers that will not only help our soil, but also protect our water as well as clean air. But farming and plants, we can simply use photosynthesis via trees and plants that stay on the ground all the time to draw carbon dioxide into the soil, replacing organic matter in the soil, which is vastly important to have healthy topsoil to grow food, period. But also, we can just put that carbon back into the soil where it needs to be. So farming is a climate solution.
Yeah. I love where you are going with this conversation, and thanks for bringing up the emissions, Cheryl, because even though we see that 10%, you're right, and I'm in these conversations all the time where we're focused on energy production, right? Coal plants and fossil fuel production, and rightly so, and things like transportation. But what you're really talking about is, I think, where we need to be with the movement is a holistic systems approach. And so when we're really thinking about, okay, it's 10% of emissions, that's a very conservative estimate based on just the output, right? And when you really think about the full life cycle of farm to table, we're talking about an enormous impact, not only on climate, but like you're saying, on our actual lifestyles. We read a great book in our Kalamazoo book club a couple years ago, We Are the Weather by Jonathan Safran Foer, that I highly recommend, because we talk about energy, everybody turns the lights on every day, but I don't know about you, but I eat at least 3 times a day. And it is a great reminder to think about where that food's coming from, what is it doing to my body, what is it doing to our environment. I was glad to see, I just came off a webinar on the My Healthy Climate Plan, and at least, in Michigan, that figure is about the same. And the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development is part of the My Healthy Climate Plan in trying to work forward with some of the solutions and the awareness that you're talking about with farmers. So I just wanted to note that. Yeah, go ahead, Cheryl. You don't need to raise your hand. You two are.
Oh, okay. Speaking of the MI draft or healthy climate plan, I wrote a public comment. It was about 26 pages long. And yes, I'm glad that the agricultural industry is part of the planning process and is involved. However, I want to talk about something that I feel really, really passionate about, and I kind of want to sound a warning bell. The industry seems to think that manure biogas and renewable natural gas production and development in our state and in our nation is a solution to 2 problems: methane emissions and what was I going to say? It must be COVID setting in. But anyways, methane emissions. I'll think of it. But anyways, so toward that end, I call it a marriage between big ag and big oil, and they've produced big baby biogas. All right, and manure has become a cash crop because of these commercial anaerobic digester projects. There are several private energy companies and public utilities that are swooping in on Michigan dairy CAFOs in particular to partner with them for the commercial production of biogas. Now, dairy manure is the preferred feedstock because it has it's been assigned the lowest carbon intensity score and therefore has the biggest payout. The problem is these environmental credits, renewable energy credits, RECs, and these subsidies through the environmental incentives, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program administered through the USDA, they make it so lucrative that it's incentivizing CAFO expansions and new constructions. And if these are dairy cows, remember about 3/4 of that methane comes from the front end. And so if you expand, you're actually increasing methane emissions. Oh yeah, and the other, to solve methane emissions and also solve our, our fossil fuel crisis, to help us, remember I said there was a second thing, that'll solve our dependence on fossil fuels. So, that's something I really want to get on the radar.
Absolutely. I think it's really important that you say that, because when we talk about climate and we talk about all the solutions, there's a old metaphor about the bathtub, right? If you're in the bathtub and it's overflowing, what would you do first? And the first thing is to shut the faucet off, right? And then worry about the cleanup. And definitely Michigan Climate Action Network sees things like biogas and natural gas. Any of this fossil fuel infrastructure is still continuing, right? We haven't shut the faucet off. And so I totally get what you're saying there. I think there's a question in the chat that helps me lead into what we had. Our kind of next piece was the links between soil health and human health. And I think this is where both of you have mentioned a little bit about actual farmers, right? I grew up on a farm in Iowa, so I can claim some pieces there. Never farmed in Michigan, but there's a question in the chat about farmers seem to do care more about climate change and absolutely understand how it's affecting it. and this change to sustainable farming and local food to table. And I'm kind of wondering if the links between soil health, right, is probably a big thing for most farmers to be thinking about in that transition. I see both of you nodding your heads, so it seems like we've hit on an area to talk a little bit more about. Go ahead, Sue.
Thanks for the transition. Of course, farmers understand the concerns that we have surrounding climate change because the climate impacts what they do every day. I want to say that farmers in the United States, about 90% of people who are farming in the United States have to have second and third incomes just to be able to maintain their farms and continue farming. And a lot of that is because of the way commodity subsidies, and when I say commodities, that's going to be things like corn, soy, wheat, and industrial raised animals. It's the way those commodities are doled out, as well as how crop insurance is purchased. Farmers that are raising fruits and vegetables, for example, they really don't benefit from nearly the commodity subsidies that other large-scale industrial farmers do. And so that is one of the things that we need to balance. The health of the soil, to regain the health of the soil, sustainable agriculture is one of those principles. And the principles of sustainable agriculture are somewhat basic. It's returning to basically farming without synthetic inputs, including nitrogen and phosphorus-based fertilizers, which really are ruining our topsoil, in addition to herbicides, fungicides, and other chemicals that kill the microorganisms in the soil. So when we have healthy soil, and healthy soil is maintained by having healthy plants with root systems that support the microbiome of the soil, that vastly improves the nutrition of the plants. Therefore, it's going to improve the nutrition of the animals that are raised, eating those plants. So animal agriculture has to return to the soil and to the pasture. I think it's important to say we all probably need to eat, as a nation, as a world, fewer animals, but incorporating animals into agriculture is important to maintain healthy soil. And so healthy plants, healthy animals mean healthy people. Without that, if we continue as we are with industrial agriculture, probably within 50 to 60 years, we're going to run out of topsoil. And then we're going to run out of a way to produce food. So this is an emergency. It's a climate emergency. It's also a food emergency and a health emergency.
Yeah, like Sue said, we're rapidly depleting, our valuable topsoil. It's a natural resource, and it's disappearing at an alarming rate, secondary to industrial agriculture. When Sue mentioned healthy soil and the farming practices that promote healthy soil, some of you may have heard the term regenerative agriculture. And Sue talked about, avoiding synthetic inputs. What we're really talking about, some people talk about regenerative agriculture as if it's something new and newfangled. It's really not. It's actually a return to tried and true farming practices that have indigenous roots. And another thing that people don't know, and I recently learned this, and I just think we need to announce this, is that innovative Black farmers like George Washington Carver were the first early adopters of what we now call regenerative agriculture. Okay, and there's a quote, I wish I had printed it so I could say it, but there's a quote by George Washington Carver about healthy soils equals healthy communities. And it's a beautiful quote, and I'll find it if anybody's interested, because it really summarizes the crux of what we're trying to say here today.
Yeah. Thank you both for those things. And I'm still hearing the subsidies that are out there, right? That are supporting industrial ag. Again, that to me is a turn the faucet off kind of policy. They're very difficult politically to end, right? Because once you build a constituency and you're used to getting that money, it's very difficult, right? That builds up a huge piece of support. We need to transition those subsidies to the kinds of things that Dr. Holcombe and Dr. Ruble are talking about today. I think the other piece when we're thinking about soil health and why I think that emissions to carbon sink kind of math is not as known, right? Because the soil is one of our greatest sequestration pieces, right? To be able to draw down when we really think about how our farming practices are working, that could be a huge carbon sink. And that's why we often talk about those methods as such a boom to being able to handle the climate crisis. And just these co-benefits of healthier lives, right? And us getting the nutrition that we need. And thank you for explaining regenerative agriculture. And there was another question in the chat, like we've kind of thrown around the words sustainable, regenerative, and most folks know about organic. Help us out. What should we be looking for? What do these words kind of mean? How do you see that landscape?
Sustainable means don't make it worse. This was the simplest and definition that I could find. Sustainable means don't make it worse. Regenerative means make it better. Once you make it better, then you can be sustainable, but sustainable isn't good enough anymore. So, and organic, so you can jump in with this. Not all food that's produced regeneratively is organic and vice versa. And, some foods can be produced both organically and regeneratively. Organic crop and livestock production requires a pretty rigorous certification program. So, Sue, I don't know if you have anything to add there.
Yeah, I thank you for bringing up the fact that we're using this jargon right now, regenerative, sustainable. I think when people talk about agricultural practices, many times those words are used hand in hand. So sustainable and regenerative, I think what it means is really returning to a set of principles that includes always having crops on the land, including cover crops, crops that are going to return nutrition to the soil to help other crops grow, using multiple types of crops, growing barriers around the farm that protect the water supply, diminished or eliminating the use of synthetic pesticides and fertilizers, and then incorporating animals into agriculture. The organic piece, certainly certification for organic is quite rigorous, and much of what is produced sustainably and or regeneratively can be considered organic, but it is expensive for farmers to get that certification, so they don't always. There is soon to be, and I think it's starting, we will see labels for regeneratively produced products. And in fact, there will also be labels that show, and I think that's going to be tough to do, but what are the greenhouse gas emissions associated with these foods? What I can recommend people do, and it's an important thing to advocate for this kind of agriculture, as Denise mentioned, we can vote at least 3 times a day whenever you eat. So when you're purchasing food, try to purchase what has been raised regeneratively. And the best way to do that is to buy directly from your farmer, because it puts more of the money in their pocket. Farmers only make about 14 cents on the dollar when they sell their product to industry to put into a grocery store. So one, buy from your farmer, then you know how that food is produced and raised. And certainly when you can, if you are an omnivore or a carnivore, if you're a meat eater, buy your meat directly from the farm, because then you will know how it's raised. And there's a lot of pasture-raised, pasture-finished animal protein produced in Michigan and certainly around the country. Apsey Farms is a great one, but there are many of them. So if we can all do that, if we can provide a revenue stream for this kind of food production, that is very important and very helpful.
I want to comment about further comment about labeling and add a caveat. There is such a thing as organic CAFO food. Okay. And we need to be careful about, industrial agriculture. We have to be careful that they might try to co-opt regenerative agriculture when it comes to labeling. So I'm just throwing that out there. And the other thing I want to add to what Sue said about how much money the smaller local farmer gets per dollar. I attended and Sue attended virtually Farm Action's Food Not Feed Summit earlier this year. And they're basically advocating for a better farm bill that shifts funding from animal feed. Remember, I said 75% of cropland goes towards animal feed to feed CAFO livestock, to human foods and a wide variety of nutritious human foods. We heard from a livestock rancher, a small livestock rancher, and this really, there were two things that stuck out at that conference. One was every farmer that got up there and spoke, and there were several, emphasized the need for supporting financially and with technical assistance, local and regional food distribution systems, hubs, kitchens, meat processing plants. They said, we can grow the food, we just can't get it to market. And this one livestock rancher, he found that he simply couldn't afford to raise his livestock because of the competition with the industrial livestock sector and how far he had to transport his cattle. So he decided to build a local meat processing plant and service his fellow smaller ranchers. He said that he was paid 20 cents on the dollar, but he pays his clients 80 cents on the dollar. One of the biggest arguments about switching from industrial ag is, oh, the food prices are going to go through the roof. Well, this one man's experience makes me think maybe not.
I really appreciate that example, especially, inflation, food prices. And I like to say my organic, local farmer eggs were only $3 a dozen, right? Is the way that we need to also, I think, rethink our expectations about how much our food costs and where it comes from. But the funding piece for our farmers, and thank you, having grown up on the family farm, and my family will very much appreciate you talking about how they continue their livelihood. Right. And I think that some of the big transitions there that need to happen are around changing those subsidies and buying local and the exact kind of local ecosystem that you're talking about, putting solar on ag farms, right? Letting farmers have that as a second income source rather than having a third and fourth job. My dad was a trucker the whole time that we did family farming as well for in the winter. I get a lot of questions already here in the chat about the Farm Bill, and you brought it up. And of course, our senior senator Stabenow has been, the lead on that committee for a long time, and some questions about what she's doing. And that's, I think, where we were going to go next anyway. Some of the things that we could do as citizens to advance healthy, sustainable, regenerative, I'll use them all, agriculture and in the United States. And where you see the Farm Bill, how do we convince Senator Stabenow and others to do some things you're talking about?
Yeah, great questions. So I think, Denise, you have this link, maybe you could put it in the chat. There is a way for everyone to comment about the Farm Bill. And if you have the time, we would love for you to click on this link and advocate for the importance of the Farm Bill to really better support nutritious food, healthy food, climate action, etc. 75% of the Farm Bill goes to nutrition programs, the SNAP program, formerly I think known as food stamps. And so it's a very important part of nutrition for folks who are not going to be able to afford to afford food. The problem with SNAP, and I think we also have to comment on this, is that those folks who have fewer dollars are stuck in this rut of purchasing food that is not necessarily nutritious. And so that is going to be a big push for the Farm Bill. Senator Stabenow is committed and is certainly understands the climate crisis, as she likes to call it. And she is also not going to be up for re-election. So we are hoping that she is going to basically pull in every favor she has available and advocate hard for a farm bill that supports farming for healthy food and to help our climate. We do know that bipartisanship is going to be important for a farm bill. But I think the more your representatives, and certainly Senator Stabenow, hears from all of us about how important the Farm Bill is for climate and for nutritious food, the better.
I agree with Sue. Reach out to Senator Stabenow. You know, if you're interested in learning more about the Farm Bill, there are two groups that I would recommend that you go to their website, Farm Action, which is a farmer-led organization, and also the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition. They both have their Farm Bill priorities outlined, and their websites contain a lot of useful information. And you know, those would be good resources to increase your understanding of the Farm Bill and, you know, help you, you know, talk to your senators and members of the Agricultural Committee. So please, we beg of you, use your voices.
Yeah, I saw Kathy Albro also mentioned National Farmers Union. That is another very good source, as well as Regenerate America, that was formerly Kiss the Ground, a wonderful movie about regenerative agriculture. So Regenerate America and the Farmers Union, two other good sources.
Great. Yeah. Well, I hope everyone gets in there, and this discussion should give you some pretty good comments and things to say. And thanks for mentioning Kiss the Ground. I was going to bring that up as well. There's a huge justice angle here with the workers, right, as well. And so following the National Farmers Union is really important. And I saw the note in the chat too about these specialty crops, meaning this is what we eat, right? Like it's like alternative energy to me. Like, no, this should be the main nutritional source, right? And I think our agricultural workers are in much the same situation, right? During COVID, we're calling these folks essential workers. I mean, they're bringing the food to our table, and there's a true justice issue. So please also support the National Farmers Union in getting those folks and the labor organized and paid fairly, and the hours are grueling, and all of those pieces. I wonder if there are some state level Michigan Department of Agriculture, Rural Development, you know, that's the federal level kind of Farm Bill piece. And I also know Citizens Climate Lobby is taking on some of the agriculture pieces, does a great job training folks and how to talk to elected officials. So if you're kind of worried about that, like those are some organizations that can help you do that. But I'm wondering if our own MDARD, or again, kind of back to My Healthy Climate Plan, if there's any kind of state level pieces that we should be watching for.
Yeah. We are very lucky that we have a new legislature in Michigan, and they are looking hard at agriculture. And maybe we could talk about these CAFOs. And a CAFO is a concentrated animal feed operation. So these are, and there are several hundred of them now in Michigan. These are where they take animals and house them in very close confines. And there are, I would say, three main issues. One is the climate issue because of the amount of nitrogen-based pollution as well as methane produced. The second is they are not fed in a way that's going to produce healthy protein. So they are mass produced, and this is not good for our diet. The third thing, and many people say this is a soft piece, but I always say loving animals is bipartisan, and you're going to find as many conservatives with pets they adore and love as you will find liberal folks. And this is not a humane way to raise animals, and it is a torturous life for many of these animals. And I truly believe if we had a commercial that could be viewed by folks during something like the Super Bowl about a CAFOs, even just following a chicken. Most people don't think of chickens as warm and fuzzy, lovely animals, but they're intelligent. The cattle, the hogs that are raised this way, I think it would change public opinion immediately, and it would be in a bipartisan way. Certainly no child would ever eat meat again. I'm fairly convinced. That is how badly treated these animals are, and it's really kept away from the public. So our legislators are looking hard. I think it's Sue Shrink. I'm going to get her.
Senator Sue Shink. Yes.
Shink. Thank you. Sue Shink is very opposed to CAFOs, and she's in charge of the Michigan Agricultural Committee right now. And so they are looking hard at trying to eliminate, restrict CAFOs, and just even enforce the laws we have in Michigan right now to limit these operations and improve the welfare. So I think there's a lot that's going to be happening in Michigan, but that is one thing that's very important. And I think if you can contact your local representatives and just talk about how important agriculture is to you, but especially CAFO operations, it's a good thing.
I'd like to add that I think Michigan is poised for a CAFO surge for the following reasons. Number one, we have very, very strong, robust right to farm laws, okay, that have preempted any local control over their siting. Yep. There are no size or density restrictions, even in impaired nutrient and E. coli impaired watersheds, which creates hotspots, pollution hotspots. Number one. Number two, we have abundant water resources. We didn't dive into this, but CAFOs use a lot of water. And we have an abundance of surface water and groundwater. And in the era of climate change induced drought and dwindling, water resources, surface waters and groundwater reserves, I think Michigan is a very, very attractive target. Plus, we are gaining as a climate haven, status. The other reason are all the incentives for CAFO expansions and new constructions for manure biogas production. The other thing I want to add is that in 2000, if you build the meat and dairy processing plants, the CAFOs will come. In 2017, a new mega pork processing plant opened up I forget the name of the city, but in Michigan. And then in St. John's, Michigan, in 2020, a mega dairy and whey processing plant started receiving milk in October 2020 from local dairies. The goal is 10,000 pigs slaughtered a day, and I think 8 billion pounds of milk processed into cheese and whey. So, for all these reasons, and the pandemic is over. And so I think we're gonna, we've been hovering around 300, but now that the pandemic, not over, but quieted, my husband has COVID, so, and I think I do too, so it's not over. So for all those reasons, I think we're facing a CAFO surge.
Wow, that is frightening. I hadn't heard it put exactly that way, Dr. Ruble. So thank you, because I have learned something a lot here today. And that is something Senator Sue Shink and others are leading. Senate Democrats have a huge clean energy future package, and we need to get them on the agriculture and rural development pieces of this transition as well. As I watch time here, I want to make sure we close with our journey statement, right? And I'm wondering, how maybe Michigan Climate Action Network and MICA can continue to support you. But what advice would you have to other folks thinking about coming into more of an advocacy role? Uh, well, Cheryl is. I love that she said.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Cheryl. First of all, I think people are already showing their advocacy by being here today. And every action is helpful, including talking to your family and friends, which can sometimes be the hardest thing. But I think just having these conversations is really important. Do what you love. I think that's also important. So if animal agriculture and agriculture isn't your thing, there are so many places to be a part of the climate solution, and find the area that speaks to you that you love.
I would say, in addition to doing what you love, do what you can. Every little bit counts. Eat meat less often. Try to buy from your local, local farmers. We're not telling anybody that they have to drastically change their diet, become a vegetarian or a pescatarian or a vegan. Eat more plant-based proteins, eat less meat and dairy. And when you do eat meat and dairy, try not to support CAFOs. Beyond that, hook up with some of these organizations that we've discussed. If you're not an organizational joining person, then call your senators, your congressmen, your representatives, write to them. I have found that people just don't know what's going on. And I think that's intentional, okay? Because once they know, their eyes open like that. That's what happened to me. I was completely ignorant until a CAFO moved next door. So we just got to get the word out, get all these issues on the public radar.
Absolutely. And that's hopefully what the network, Michigan Climate Action Network, can kind of help you do. That is our name, Action Network, and being that megaphone and putting those pieces out there. And I also really loved what you said. I think both of you really made the point that we already know what to do. We have, and the solutions have been around. It's more of a return to, the way that maybe I even grew up on the farm, right? And some of the practices that we had then before the big shift, right? So I really think that we do know what to do. And from my perspective, it is about that social awareness, creating the social norms to move back to a regenerative peace, and getting that political will to address this and changing that overall system, right? And so I hope you'll join me in that. There's about a minute left. I think I got to all the questions in the chat, except for there's a specific one about do either of you happen to know, or anyone, the status of the Michigan State University initiative to have mobile meat processing units? And again, I'm learning something. I don't know if anybody here, we can open mic time. If anybody knows about that, go ahead, Sue.
No, I don't know about their mobile units. I've never heard of that. Michigan State has a large regenerative agriculture center led by Dr. Jason Roundtree, and they have, a couple of farms across the state. But I don't know anything about mobile meat processing.
Neither do I. So something more for me to learn about and research. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Any other questions or comments or final words here for our wonderful practitioners to advocates?
Thank you, Doreen, for that link. I'm copying and pasting that.
Yeah. This is how much there is to know right now, because I learn new stuff every minute from those of you out there working. There are just so many sectors and so many pieces to work on. Thanks, Doreen. And thanks all of you for being able to join us here at our joint Michigan Clinicians for Climate Action and Michigan Climate Action Network series. Again, both of us host a monthly series, so you can join. We're going to try not to conflict again, is why we did this as a co-host this month, so that you can go to both or not, right? So go to Micah, go to MyCan, check out all the organizations that folks have given the chat. And let's give a big hand to Dr. Ruble and Dr. Holcombe for walking us through everything today. Thank you so much. And especially you, Cheryl, get better. Let us know how it goes. Well, thanks everyone. On behalf of Lisa Del Buno, we will share the recording out and make sure that everyone gets the link to the Farm Bill and get your comments in. Have a good rest of your Friday, everyone. Bye.